Hi, Bill.
Hello, Janet.
Welcome back to New York City.
Thank you.
Welcome to New York Live Arts.
Yeah, great.
So we're very happy to present your latest work, Touch Update. So maybe we should talk about how did this piece start? What was your first inspiration for that?
I was looking at a lot of how dance was presented in my own fields of street dance, but also dancers with disabilities. I have a long history of developing a vocabulary of dance on crutches that's very defined, and that over my career of performing this material, I kind of noticed how a lot of the writing and sort of critique and sort of creative discussion about the dancing was centering the sort of impetus or the creative source around the crutches, sort of like dancing to overcome the crutches, or using the crutches as the sort of symbolism of the dance. And so one of the things I wanted to do was to kind of reverse the historical trend of disabled dancers learning able-bodied technique-based forms and translating them into a disabled dance style that approximates or assimilates those historically forms based in two legs on the ground with your weight distributed in this way. And so I wanted to put my dance, and particularly the choices I made with my body, which were for me the creative source of the dance, was what I was doing with my body, and to sort of run counter to the notion that a dance is made to overcome or in response to or in spite of having crutches, and that these choices were formal, they were based in the body, and what is it like to see them without the trappings of disability in them. I mean, it's not a new idea that able-bodied performers would emulate a disabled performer. Like, I think that's happened already. It's not some new thing. But I think because of the extent of the way that I have kind of really defined very specific elements of my technique, that it sort of fits in the idea of translating a technique, which in and of itself is a question about well, what is the value of a technique versus dancing? You know what I'm saying? And like what the balance of that is. I mean, I'm not like trying to define this technique as the only way to do something, but rather an economy of movement. So to translate, so the impetus behind creating the show, on the first thought of it, was let me reverse this and make the whole piece thread this through. And that was the first idea. I mean, it's become much more complicated from that original impetus.
Right.
Yeah.
So this is not the first time that you've made a work using this reverse engineer form. It is?
Well, I have done it in the past as a sort of a thought where I'm on stage with it, and the other dancers kind of go with me and kind of assimilate my movement. But the process this time was really different. The process was also about the dancers' process of engaging the material and really making it their own. That the process of translation is more than just miming the move, or like, look, I have a crutch, and like sort of I'm grabbing the crutch, and I'm like, that is not what we were into. We weren't interested in pantomime. We weren't interested in sort of this pretending that there's something there. We were interested in how does the form of my body, the shapes of the body that I make, how does it work without the trappings of the crutch. And there's a lot of theory around what happens when you put a disabled person in a role on a theatrical stage, and what happens to the narrative for the audience. You're looking at the piece, and all of a sudden there's someone on crutches, and you're like, okay, well, do they really need the crutches? So you kind of step back from the suspension of disbelief, or just the immersion in the narrative and the texture of the piece, because you're now all of a sudden confronted with real world issues and real world questions that you want answered. And so removing that was the disabled body from the equation was a tactical choice of mine to say it's still a work that is centered around the disabled form and the disabled experience, in the sense that the content is there. Like that's what makes it. It's not the body that makes it, you know, a work around. I mean, there's people, able-bodied people, making work on disabled people that isn't about disabled people. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, yeah.
So
now, there's a new dancer in the piece, Raphael.
Yes.
I can't say his last name.
Nepomucemo.
Great. And he was a performer with Cirque du Soleil.
Yeah.
And he's performing your material, but using crutches.
Yes.
But he's not a disabled performer.
Right. Right.
Now, how does that come across? Because were people a little taken aback by, why are you using crutches? You're not disabled.
Right. So this is also like chance. Like as an author and as an artist, I have my impetus and my reasons for making something. And so for the first 2 years of development of the piece, there was no dancer on crutches in the piece. And you know, some people had commented, Bill, you should be in the work. Bill, please be in the work. You know, because I'm the virtuoso, the author of the form.
Right.
And so for me to be in the work, though, would go against the grain of what I was trying to do, which is to keep the disabled body out of the piece, and put the disabled content there, like the disability-based, you know, because it's not just disabled content, but the physics of my dance are what set it apart from an able-bodied form.
Yeah.
So what happened is one of the dancers got injured.
Yeah.
I had to replace them, and Raphael, I trained him in my form.
Yeah.
So it's not as if he just grabbed crutches as an able-bodied person and just started doing random things and whatever, making narratives out of like disability narrative or trauma narratives that are dominant when you start, like, you know, when you have able-bodied performers sort of crip-facing is what you know, a sort of a term that's out there that is about, you know, able-bodied people pretending to be disabled. And sort of drawing that parallel to blackface in a very easy, simplistic way, but it's prevalent. You know, it's you can still do crip-face. You can still like pretend to be disabled, and it's just like having a thunderstorm in your horror film. There's a thunderstorm, then there's a person with a brace on their leg chasing you with a scar. You know what I mean? Like, so that the role of disability as a sort of an ingredient in creating a narrative is just openly, you know, added. And so the disabled community is kind of like fatigued with this. Like, okay, you know, you've done enough, you know, evil people in wheelchairs. Let's, you know, who aren't disabled, who are in the, like, hire disabled people,
Right.
or not, or don't use it. You know what I'm saying? So that's the argument.
So you're doing a reverse almost.
Exactly. I'm reversing that and saying, okay, well, I'm actually training an able-bodied person in an historic form that was defined and created solely in disability. In other words, I was playing as a child on crutches, and that's the roots of the technique are in the lived experience of physical disability and the alternative physics, the weight distribution that happens when you're not on 2 feet. And that history of years and years and years and years of weight distribution across 4 points has evolved into this very specific set of movements of economy to go from the floor to standing. And that's the technique. And then beyond the technique is your own style on top of the core. So you just have the core technique, which is like how to best navigate the floor, mid-level, you know, up and down like that. And there's all this vocabulary around it. So Raphael knows that from me personally. So I transferred this knowledge onto him. So the way that he's using crutches is very different from crip-face in the sense that he actually is using them from the knowledge base of the disabled experience.
Yeah. And the crutches are like props almost, like something that you use as an extension of yourself, of your body. I mean, him.
Yeah, well, he uses the crutch. Well, the thing about the crutches as a kid, and one of the things I was laughing about, is when I was a kid, you know, my doctor gave me crutches, and then my brother was really mad. And my parents were like, "Why are you so upset? Why you know? I want crutches too." You know, but he didn't need crutches, but he wanted crutches because he saw what I was doing, which was turning them into like a reacher and a poker and a gun and a, you know, a little shelter, and they become a million and one things, you know. And so in the piece, I started to realize, like, well, you know, Raph isn't disabled, but when he's dancing, he is performing a disabled form, even though he's able-bodied.
Right.
In the same way that able-bodied people perform non-disabled form, you know, and so he's still, you know, I consider that to be an authentic representation. It is not crip-face. And so once I started doing that, then I'm like, well, okay, make it whatever you want, you know. So throughout the piece, the crutches show up as different things, you know, and it became this sort of narrative of also of, you know, of the underlying politics of where do disabled people come from? How are, you know, how does disability play as an economic kind of force in the world? Like, so there's a deeper political layer to the piece that I think was inevitable in the way that I make work. Yeah.
Well, it's a perfect segue into talking about the politics of the work. So it's not, you're not making an abstract concert dance. You're doing something different. There's something you want to say with this work.
Right.
Where does the title come from?
Touch Update, it comes from this idea that we're getting, you know, you download your updates. It's not a physical thing, you know, it's between people. People, you know, are up. So I just wanted this idea of physical contact as touching, as that really ancient sort of way of communicating, like before, you know, it's like, before language, there was dancing, which was a very physical. We you know, there's a lion coming. You know, like physical signaling, and touch were the first communication forms, and so I wanted to tie from that very earliest form of communication of touch and movement to the most recent, you know, idea of like an app that's updated or a software that you update. And to kind of smash those two things together, you know, and have a conversation about how, you know, we manage to curate these digital sort of faces, and that it creates both an intensified degree of communication, but also a very fractured and frayed sort of way, a way of socializing, and so it's not, you know, the challenge of what you call art activism, or, you know, activist art making, which is that, you know, to not become didactic, to not become, you know, this is bad and this is good, and then your audience is like, okay, I'm getting preached at, I want to, you know, let's go. I'm not here for that, you know. So, you know, I was very careful and cautious about you know, becoming preachy. So even though the work is very political, it is not an overt kind of approach. And I grew up from activist parents, so I've been around a lot of overt, like, okay, we're setting the agenda, these are the things we want, you know, these are the things, these are the issues, these are the problems, and addressing them in a very concrete, direct manner. And as an artist, I want to kind of invite people in to ask the questions themselves and to go through the journey of how those questions are asked and what those relationships are between the very real lived experience and the communicated sort of digital networking and both alienation and intensified, you know, proximity that whole and the sort of that the digital realm or the internet provides for us.
Yeah. So where are you on the spectrum, on that spectrum of, are you a mad digital device person, addicted, or are you more sensible, if that's the right word to use?
I'd say I really am a roller coaster of both. Like, I grab pieces of rust and wire them together and weld things and really am hands-on as a maker. but I'm also very, very deeply questioning the nature of humanity, and that, you know, that is in essence staring into the abyss. You know, I mean, it's literally like the, you know, the heights and the depths of humanity.
Yeah.
You know, man's humanity to man and man's inhumanity to man, or woman.
Well, and now we're at the verge of a artificial intelligence revolution, where you question what is human anymore.
Right.
Yeah. You know, I personally tend to, you know, think, oh my God, Amazon is taking over everything, and then I go and shop there.
Right.
Because I can't find things that I need anywhere else. I don't even know where to buy certain things.
Right.
Out on the street. It's crazy. And then I contribute to the shops closing down the street because I don't shop there. Now, talking about technology, this piece has a strong technological element.
Yeah.
This thing you call it wearable technology?
Yeah, wearable technology,
Yeah.
Wearable video masks specifically, and also sculpture for dance, video sculpture for dance. And in both of those instances, you know, I was approaching making and video specifically as a dancer, you know, like, and my experience of, okay, well, you know, you've got these projectors way out here and they're washing the entire stage with this imagery, and, you know, people are almost overwhelmed. You know, the humans in the work could like die on stage and there would still be like this amazing show, you know, and like that, you know, the dancer could just be, you know, it would still be great. I'd be like, oh, this is so cool. And so my immediate response, well, not my immediate response, but after watching it for years, and, you know, starting with just being frustrated with the projected rectangle behind the dancers doing the thing on the stage, you know, that was just torture to me. And then the new sort of, everything's mapped, and then it, like, the video moves when you go near it, and sort of building that grid overhead that then has the tracking video where you're kind of in this world that's taken over. And so my response was almost to invert that and say, you know, there is no video without the human body there. If there's no body, there's nothing to look at. And so from there I said, let's put the projector on the human, projecting outward. So the dancer is dancing the video. As opposed to light washing over the dancer, the light comes from the dancer outward.
Yeah.
So that was a critical sort of conceptual approach for the two works that are featured in this piece, that are both, one of them is a wearable video mask in which the video projector is mounted on the head with a Raspberry Pi and like syncing devices for the other ones so that they can talk, and the screens are arranged in the wearable chassis on the head, and the mask is there. It's you know, recorded faces that are talking to each other and then, you know, transmitting the audio out, and so that's the wearable video mask. And it was also like this sort of metaphor for the face in front of the face, kind of like talking, and then you have your real face behind that curated face.
Right. So it's always mediatized. Our communication.
Yeah, and so they're almost like the Greek chorus to the piece, like that, you know, there's these sections of dance and movement, and then there's these like characters coming out of this, you know, ether, this uncanny valley of technology and humanity, and having these very kind of like open conversations that are not preachy and kind of about how humans are, you know, what do people do, and some of it's taken from the real world, you know, some real world aspects of interactions between people, and some of it is from my personal story, and some of it is actually from the performers. Some of the performers have brought their own stories and language into the piece, so it's been a very collaborative process as well. And then to talk a little bit about the dance sculpture. The dance sculpture, you know, is a piece, a fragmentation series, a video installation that I worked on, that I developed some years ago. And it's just the next generation of this sort of approach to looking at a dance from all the angles simultaneously. So basically it's an array of 7 cameras that is pointed at the body from these different angles. And then the cameras feed into projectors that are arranged in on a sculpture, that then have the panels showing these different at different angles, showing the different angles.
Right.
So you have this very sort of real-time transformation of the body in this sort of abstract, cubist-inspired, surreal, and very physically present way. And then from the pre-recorded cameras, those cameras feed into an array of Raspberry Pis that then switch from live recording to pre-recorded. So then I also shoot the dancers before the show. I edited that all together and then put it on the Raspberry Pis as individual video files. And then they all play back to all the screens, and that's the pre-recorded version of the same that they're doing live. So the idea is to switch between the live and the pre-recorded, this mix of bodies, and create a sort of sculpture that is about dance, and it also moves, and it's just an answer to that whole video taking over. Like, if you're not behind the sculpture, you don't see anything.
There's nothing, right?
There's nothing, there's just blank, it's just a clear, and the screens are also transparent. They're not big, white panels. They're clear, they're see-through. So all you see is a bunch of empty panels and some metal scaffolding holding them. But until the body is there, there's nothing. And so that's the idea of the video from the dancer, like me, the dancer, as a maker, I make things related to my practice as a dancer that feeds into solving conceptual issues or stylistic issues or aesthetic issues that I recognize for my own reasons in the field and want to kind of answer and bring an answer to in my own way. And so the piece is really also a lot about those, it's about those answers. So it's political in terms of disability, but it's also political in terms of how what the dancer's body is on stage, and this highly technical, now becoming like really an interdisciplinary field. Like dance to me is interdisciplinary. And I've always been an interdisciplinary artist, even to the point of saying I'm not a dancer, because it's like dancer. Bill Shannon's like, I'm not a dancer. Right? I'm an artist. I do interdisciplinary work, and I also happen to dance.
That's what I sense from you, that you push away the labels. A little bit.
I try. It's hard.
It's, oh my God, who are you? What are you? I need labels. But when I first saw the image of this sculpture, it makes me think of, oh, he's doing post-structuralist deconstruction, blah, blah, blah. Because I'm not versed in that. I thought, oh, that's interesting. He's taking the body and taking it apart and reassembling it and playing with our conception. But is it difficult? I know you talk about lighting, washing out video, but behind the sculpture with a live camera, is it hard to control the lighting on the dancer's body in order to capture their image to project live onto the screens? Is that a hard thing to deal with?
Well, yeah, I mean, I'm using like micro laser projectors, which are a sort of small form projector. So not only is it challenging, but they're also not super bright like a big projector. It's like, oh, it's 15,000 lumens. You're going to be able to see this from a block away. Like micro laser projectors are a newer technology, and they're not very bright. So you have to kind of, it's a real balance, and it becomes, but to me it just makes it more ethereal. Like that because you still see the physical bodies of the dancers through the screens, even when their image is projected on the screen. So, you might see like a video of a hand on this transparent screen, and then like a section of a leg that's real, like a real leg that kind of has an elbow coming out to a video of a hand. And so it becomes like this, you have to choose. Am I looking at the real dancers, or am I looking at the composition of the video, or am I trying to like mush them together? So as a viewer, you have to kind of make these choices about how you're even looking at it. That kind of forces you into that, what are they doing back there? Oh wait, that's what the video's doing, but how does that relate? So you're trying to draw the connections. And so I found that really fascinating and entertaining, and the way that it's lit is just really careful. You have to just light it really carefully. It just takes a really long time.
I can imagine we're taking away from your tech time having this conversation. But I find it so fascinating that you're fragmenting so many ideas on stage, including our body, and that's how I feel like sometimes we live in the world right now. That I don't know what the whole is anymore.
That things are fractured in a real way, and and that we, and that metaphor of crutches also, I think, just humanity is so hurt but still moving, and there's a scene in the piece where, a character says, I'm going to stand my ground with my crutches, that I'm going to stay here, it's not about this violence, but that we are hurting, but we're still moving, we're still dancing, we're still here.
Yeah.
And so that sort of broader metaphor of, the struggle of humanity to, hopefully rise above, the fascist tide, literally.
Yeah.
And I don't really want to get heavily into politics, but I do see, fascism as a real threat globally. And that this work is a response to that moment to some, to some extent as well.
No, absolutely.
Yeah.
And what the horrible thing, that shooting that just happened in Pittsburgh, and
Right.
that's another
Right.
example of everything that's happening right now, and that
Yep.
we know that we will stand and we will rise and we'll stand our ground and move forward. Well, you're doing a lecture on Saturday,
Yes.
talking about the reverse engineering
Yeah.
movement, right? Is that right?
Well, the lecture is called The Condition
Yeah.
Arriving.
Yeah.
And the lecture is about the idea of the disability. Well, it's taken from my phenomenology, language around phenomenology, which is a whole aspect of my practice that we haven't really discussed and is not part of this project.
Yeah.
But a lot of the phenomenology around street performance and representation of disability and how things happen in public, and condition arriving is the idea that my condition arrives before me. So a good example of that might be, I walk into a restaurant and like the receptionist clears a table right near the front door because they think I can't walk very far, so sit him right here. But let's say it's wintertime and when the door opens, all this cold air comes in and I'd rather sit in the back. So the receptionist then makes an arrangement for my condition without talking to Bill Shannon, the person who has the condition. So the condition arrives before me. It has all of these assumptions built in and all of this effort, human emotional investment. And then if I compete with the condition that has arrived before me, a lot of times there can be conflict or resentment or unspoken kind of things happening. And so if I say I want to actually, do you mind if I sit in the back after they've gone through this effort, which I may not have even noticed or told them to stop. I don't know what they're doing all the time. I just know that I'm informed later that this was made for my condition, or like, oh, we got a special hotel room for you that's, accessible, but meanwhile the hotel like redid a storage room with no window. You know what I mean? Like, so like that happens, often, and so that's the condition arrived. They didn't ask me what room do you want. I would say I want a room with morning light, please. Like that kind of thing.
Right.
So that's sort of the title is based on that. But then beyond that, the lecture is also about like why I'm making the work that I'm making, when and where I enter, and other people in the field who are making art and making work around representations of disability, and my personal experience with some of these institutions and some of these artists, and kind of when and where I enter, and what my observations are. And so that's what the lecture is about. That it's also a little bit about, it's about Touch Update and the motivations behind staging a work that is a work based in disability that has no disabled bodies in it, and what are the politics of that? Why would I do something like that? I think people will have that question, and I'm more than prepared to discuss that in depth and really kind of have a conversation about the field, and almost like a reliance on the disabled body, as that's what makes it disabled. Disabled people with able-bodied people are doing this thing, and so and so just looking at conceptual basis and the integrity of the concepts behind the choices made around representation of disability in performance, in dance, and in theater.
Well, I can't wait to see the performance,
Thank
and
you.
I will of course be at the lecture too. Well, I myself am learning a lot from just speaking with you, and my perception is that, like I said, I feel like you push against the labels and the boundaries and the siloing of you into this thing called disability
Right.
art.
Well, you know, I just want to say about this piece, you know, it's been a really long journey, and I've had a lot of really strong people who have been behind the work, and that have kind of helped me in being strategic about how to get away from like being siloed, you know, and sort of, you know, talking with me about the direction of the work and, you know, how I can do it reasonably, you know, because I tend to want to be very like a little bit maybe too aggressive about like, you know, I'm not a dancer, you know, like this is not what this is, you know, and how to best develop the work. And, you know, one of the early people on board, Janera Solomon from Kelly Strayhorn Theater, and also Carla Peterson from Mancy. We did this residency at Mancy.
That's right.
And it was incredible, and we had some amazing artists on there who aren't even part of the project now, like Stacey Pearl Arts from Pittsburgh, Pearl Arts Studios. Those people really helped kind of the birth of this piece, along with some of the artists who are still a part of the piece, like Grit Down Gang, Tina Custer and Ron Chun, who were the sort of dancers I cipher with and session with, and you know, they're like, you know, I don't want to make a disabled dance piece around breaking anymore, but that's such a part of my vocabulary that I can't let go. So they keep it real for me. They hold that down for me.
Yeah.
And I also want to mention Projectile Objects, he basically did all the coding. So, you know, those masks that talk together.
Yeah.
And he's also the person who's like, you know, Bill, well, you're being unprofessional right now. You know, like get off the phone and like do, you know what I mean? Like, so he's a real like driver of the piece and kind of keeping me, you know, on my game and pushing me because I've pulled in a million different ways throughout the course of developing the project. And then there's Slow Danger, who was 25 to watch, you know, this past year, and so I'm really proud of their, you know, recent achievements in the field, and that they're a part of this piece, and they were so dedicated to the process. And also Taylor actually did the soundtrack, who is also from Slow Danger, but they do a lot of music. So it's been a really strong team with them. And even further back with the sort of administrative elements of it, like George Lugg. He was very much about this tour and talking to all the people after I got NDP to like make this happen. It probably wouldn't have happened without him, because it's the kind of person that you need on your side to talk to the right people, to get the forms filled out and all of those things that I'm horrible at, you know, because I'm really not the best administrator at all. I should not be allowed anywhere near pencils. But yeah, so
that's how I met you too, through George, around this time last year, the conference.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Well, I came to APAP, and also like Mike Reed has been really supportive of my work, and Janet, you of course have been very supportive of my work, and also like Sarah Greenbaum, Ben Levine,
and a dance place.
Yeah, dance place.
In DC,
And Laurel at Painted Bride. So these are all the people that brought this tour together to make Coming to Nyla an actual thing. Yeah. So I was really, really grateful for all those people who, you know, have been a part of it. You know, James Whitewolf, the lighting designer, and Jenna we brought on a stage manager. We didn't have a stage man. You know, so this piece is also like ballooned into like this bigger production than it ever was. So yeah.
Growing pains.
Yep. So that's it. That's all the people I wanted to mention, because I really feel like, okay, this is Bill Shannon and Nyla, but really without the support, you know, it just wouldn't. This scale of a project with all the wearables, the complexities of physical computing of this, I didn't write any code for this. You know, I have someone on the team, Projectile Objects, who basically made that happen. You know, and with the soundtrack too, and it's just a group process, and it's really the first piece that I am a director of without actually being in it. So this is my directorial debut as well. So I'm excited about that, and it's the first time like it's opening night and I'm just sitting in a chair like biting my nails. Like there's nothing I can do. Sit back and sit back. And so thank everyone who's been a part of this, and thank you too for supporting the work. And we're going to APAP and we're going to NPN and we're going to show excerpts of this piece, and hopefully, the world will be able to see more of it.
Right,
so
you're going to be back during APAP at our live artery.
Yeah.
That's great. So, well, on that note, I think we should go back to work.